Lines in wax, initiating, startup, running. We are connected.
Hi everyone, Sean here from Lines in Wax, back at you with another retrospective video. Haven't done one of these for a while, been doing a lot of album rankings and other things, so it's nice to get back to the retrospectives, and I wanted to do something special now that I'm back doing these. So this year was the perfect year to do this, because this year means 40 years of this band, who are for me rather, quite possibly the greatest thrash metal band to ever exist. I am talking, of course, about
Voivod.
Yes, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. You will have to put up with all sorts of crappy effects on my voice because, yeah, I'm going all out with the production values for this one. Voivod are a Canadian heavy metal, thrash metal, alt rock, stonery. They've had all sorts of kind of stuff going on over the years. Band of all these different styles. They were originally a four-piece, so they're a four-piece now, but they originally formed with four members: Snake, Piggy, Away, and Blacky. Snake on vocals, Piggy on guitar, Away on drums, and he's also the artist for the band primarily, and Blacky on bass. They have had a few lineup changes over the years, and we'll go through these as and when we reach those points in the band's career. But for now, I want to get stuck into the early days of Voivod because they made some of the like nastiest thrash metal that you could possibly get your hands on. And so let's take a look then. Let's not mess around. Let's not pontificate. Let's not end up with another hour and 45-minute long video. Let's get straight in and talk about Voivod's first record.
War and Pain.
That first record is, of course, War and Pain. Now, War and Pain is fucking hell. It's without looking back, it's hard. It's sometimes easy to forget, right, how brutish and blunt a weapon that early Voivod was before the trademark dissonance and progressive science fiction stuff took over the band's like mesmerizing songwriting. The band purveyed an interesting blend of unforgiving thrash metal. Sure, compared to some other efforts, the production on War and Pain from 1984 is somewhat lacking, okay? But it's early 80s noisy thrash metal, so this can be forgiven. But, you can also find, personally, that the unpolished, rugged edges to War and Pain add to the oral assault on the senses, much in the way that the grime of the early black metal movement added to the compositions those artists were working on. And you know what? You can actually draw parallels, I think, between Venom and early Voivod. I think that's not a ridiculous thing to say. It's got that same kind of like shambling, nasty sound. Obviously, War and Pain. Just look at War and Pain. Look at the album cover. It's different vibe from what Venom are doing, obviously, but that thrashy, speedy, really quick, like awesome sound. I think you could definitely make parallels between Venom and War and Pain. So yeah, what a way to start in 1984 with this album. Like, I love it kicks off like in a Black Sabbath kind of way with the Voivod song Voivod, and realistically though, I'm not like super into this. I love this album, but I'm not like gonna like die on a hill defending it because it is a messy one. And I don't really have any standout songs. I kind of chuck it on and just leave it run through, but it's a really, really, really good album. And, it's a good start for our friends in Voivod. So what came next then? 2 years later down the line, we had Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm not going to make a fool out of myself presenting this album title every time I mention it, so I'm just going to say Roar as the album title. I'm not going to go all in on that pronunciation, as encouraged by the words on the screen. As I said about War and Pain, though, the same applies here. Early Voivod records are a treatment in pure, blunt sonic force. Sure, the weirdness, I suppose, was there right from the start, but it didn't really start developing properly, I think, until a few records in. But Raw is absolutely still worth your time, as probably one of the hardest Voivod records. In fact, it might even just hit a little harder than War and Pain. It might just edge it. It just comes at you in its weird fucking alien tank thing on the cover. And, it comes at you guns blazing. Standout tracks this time, definitely. Opening duo of Korgil the Exterminator and the aptly titled Fuck Off and Die, as well as the closing duo of the insane Build Your Weapons and the finale To the Death. 36 minutes of fantastic speeding, brutal, mental thrash metal music. It is probably some of the hardest thrash you can get your hands on, at least in that like proto kind of world, in the early to mid 80s. Obviously there are bands now which have kind of pushed the template a bit further, but for what it is, this is fantastic stuff, really. I also, when I listened to all the Voivod albums this year, I went to see Voivod live earlier this year, and I had the opportunity to, because they were playing the 40th anniversary set where they were doing deep cuts off each album, I listened to the entire discography. So I had the time to listen to both the original version of Rrroooaaarrr as well as the 2017 remaster. And I listened to them back to back, and there's a bunch of original demo mixes on the remaster of Rrroooaaarrr which I haven't heard yet. I will say that both the original mix of Rrroooaaarrr and the remaster from 2017 both have merit. So if you see like the remaster out and about, don't be afraid to pick it up, because I know sometimes remasters can be a little bit it's very rare in my eyes that a remaster makes things better. I mean, obviously it does, like, there's a reason people remaster things, but a lot of the time I feel like just fucking leave things alone, don't fucking mess around with them. But here it's okay. The 2017 remaster is definitely a little clearer than the original mix, but sorry, not the mix, but the master. But there is something just about the blunt assault of the 1986 original master that just tickles me in the right place a little bit more, But either way, you can't go wrong. But I thought I'd just mention that, for the sake of completion, I suppose. Anyway, Voivod did not fuck around, as you can probably tell. They were on something of a roll in the early 80s, going into the mid to late 80s, and 1 year later, their third album would come. And that album was called
Killing Technology.
Killing Technology. We are connected. I think this is, for me, like, not that I dislike the first two albums, as I've just spent several minutes gushing about how amazing they are. This is where Voivod becomes Voivod. This is like, it's not their final form, is it? But it's like peak Voivod. This is when those dissonant fucking wailing guitars that are like, have now been like imitated so much in metal throughout the years. This is where it really kind of comes out and just is like the perfect example of that. It is like an absolute classic of the thrash metal genre, but it's also so much more than that. It's like Voivod are like the Swiss Army knife of the thrash metal world, and Killing Technology pinpoints the turning point where Voivod's primitive, brutal thrash morphed significantly into something far wider and more experimental in scope. Just the opening song, Killing Technology, is 7.5 minutes with fucking robot voices and all sorts of weird progressive kind of song elements. The second song, Overreaction, is just as good, if not a little shorter. I also like the first track on side B, Forgotten in Space, and the reason I kind of got into this was because Agoraphobic Nosebleed covered it, of all bands. It's on, I can't remember what split or EP or whatever it ended up on, but I heard it on the Bestial Machinery compilation CD from Agoraphobic Nosebleed. So, and there's a lot of references Agoraphobic Nosebleed make to Voivod, which I will touch upon maybe if I do an Agoraphobic Nosebleed video. I should probably do an Agoraphobic Nosebleed video. I'm going off on a tangent, but yeah, I should definitely do that because they are incredible, and I don't know if they're underrated, but there's stuff that's really good. The mad grind shit is definitely underrated. But anyway, I'm not talking about Agoraphobic Nosebleed. I'm talking about Voivod. Killing Technology, quite possibly Voivod's best album or one of their best albums. Don't know. This one's up for debate. Maybe I'll do a ranking on Voivod as well. But yeah, this is just peak fucking thrash metal with like all these weird sci-fi elements, and that's why I love it so much. It's not just straight up thrash metal. There's so much more going on, and yeah, it's literally just the coolest thing in the world. But they would continue to expand on this sound, and they would continue on this. They were definitely on a roll in the late 80s. Again, within a year, we had another follow-up, the fourth album from Voivod,
Dimension Hatross.
Authentic is liberty.
There it is, Dimension Hatross. There it is. Now, I just want to do a personal anecdote here, which kind of goes off the retrospective tangent a bit, but I never used to like Voivod. I first really only, like I said, came across them on that Agoraphobic Nosebleed cover song in the late mid-2000s. It wasn't until I started going to Roadburn Festival a lot in like 2011, 2012. My friends kept going for many years after that, but I kind of lost interest in the whole like stoner doom thing. But Voivod, they had like a residency at one year, I think it was 2012, where they played like 2 or 3 sets or something ridiculous like that. And, I thought, well, there's a fair chance I'm going to end up watching Voivod at this festival. So I started checking out Voivod, and I think the first album I ever listened to was Dimension Hatross. And that was because, again, of Agoraphobic Nosebleed name dropping that album in a song off their Agor Apocalypse album. And I didn't really like it. I thought the production was really hollow and weird. I didn't really understand the whole like sci-fi aspect of it, and I don't think I made it to the end of the track Experiment. You know what I mean? I don't think I made it through those 6 minutes. So I don't really know what changed. I don't know what made me go back to Voivod with a greater appreciation for what they were doing. But in my short review of this that I posted on Rate Your Music, I think, I wrote that Voivod was like a cigar. Like when you first have a fucking drag of a cigar or something, it's just like, what the fuck is this? It's kind of like overwhelming. But then you just sit on it and think for a while and then go back to it. And then you start to realize how nuanced the flavors, or in Voivod's case, the sound can be. And you just, it's an acquired taste is what I'm trying to say in this ridiculous ham-fisted fucking, example. Voivod is an acquired taste. It's not for everybody, is it? It's fucking weird sci-fi thrash. And Dimension Hatross does have that kind of weird hollow production, I suppose. And but yeah, these days I do look on Voivod in a whole new light. Dimension Hatross is one of the best records in their large repertoire of albums. Songs like Experiment, Tribal Convictions, and Chaos Mongers, like that fucking hat trick is just amazing. When I caught them live recently, they played Macro Solutions to Mega Problems, which I really enjoyed. It's probably my favorite song on side B. Again, this is kind of in the same vein as Killing Technology, a bit more of an expansion on that kind of sound with that wailing dissonance and the uncommon kind of time signatures, I guess. It's not exactly like fucking Dillinger Escape Plan or Mr. Bungle, but it's still pretty abstract, and it still keeps the brutality going as well at the same time. And again, look at that artwork. I just love Away's artwork, and it's one of the best things about Voivod, I think, and probably part of what pulled me back as well after, maybe not being initially so much of a big fan. So yeah, that's 1988's Dimension Hatross. That band would quickly follow that record up with 1989's
Nothingface.
Hey you, tell me what's your call name. Close negative display.
Yes, Nothingface. And I will say Nothingface is probably the first album I heard in its entirety that made sense to me. Like, I kind of got into the, like, Eric Forrest stuff, which we will come to. But as for traditional Voivod, I always found it quite puzzling. Nothingface kind of made me see the bigger picture, because Nothingface is a little bit cleaner than that what came before it. You still got all these songs based around these, like, uncommon, technical, time signatory fucking fannying around that I don't know anything about because I'm not a musician. And you've got all these whittling kind of dissonant riffs, which, is one of the best things about Voivod. But on Nothingface, there is more of a, how can I say, cleaner kind of aspect to it. I'm not just talking about the production, I'm talking about just the songwriting in general. It's a little bit more accessible. And and that's why I guess it made sense. Songs like Pre-Ignition and Into My Hypercube. I think they played Pre-Ignition recently on this year's tour. That's why that stands out to me. And they also got the Astronomy Dominique fucking, I can't even say that right. I think it's not Pink Floyd did that. I should know that, but I don't know. But yeah, it's fucking just, another expansion, another layer again to the sound of Voivod. And it's arguably as well in 1989 at the end of that decade when the band started to get a bit more popular. They started to reach a wider audience. And I think songs like, like the ones I just mentioned, were part of that reason. So, and it's also part of the success of Nothingface, that extra maybe layer of clean production and that more accessible kind of elements without really losing any of the elements that were there before. Maybe it's not as brutal as War and Pain. Obviously, there's been a progression there, but it's still, it's still quintessentially Voivod, which is more than I can say for stuff that would come a bit later. But yeah, I can see why this was starting to blow up the band, and they were heading to the mainstream of metal, I guess, at that time. And what would come from that is maybe not what everyone was expecting. So it's a 2-year gap now until 1991 when the next record would drop, and that would be
Angel Rat.
Angel Rat is, for me, the first misstep in the Voivod discography. Now, Angel Rat has its fans. Don't get me wrong. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that this was a fucking disaster and everyone hated it. There are fans of this album, and it does have some deep cuts and it does have its like cult following, I guess, for lack of a better term. But you can probably tell immediately from the art that I've placed on screen that this is quite clearly a different direction, and they definitely tried to change things up here. I don't know if they're trying to cash in on not cash in, that's probably the wrong word, but like embrace the fame that was perhaps finally coming to them after, coming up to a decade, nearly almost, or at least they've been active for most of the 80s, right? So going into the 90s, maybe they decided to change things up. It's a weird one for Voivod. And that's really saying something by Voivod standards, right? But seriously, this disposes of the hectic, dissonant thrash that makes Voivod, and instead makes us listen to what can only be described as hectic, dissonant grunge, As I said, or alluded to in some of my previous words there, some people on the internet who get very angry about these things say that it's Voivod's sellout album. Now, like I said, I don't know if that's really true, but it still has some good songs, but it really isn't what I would consider to be a favorite of mine. It definitely tried to fit maybe Voivod's sound into what was going on in the zeitgeist of the is that you say zeitgeist of the early 90s. I think that's what was happening here. Anyway, The Prow is probably one of the best songs on here, as is Nuage Fractal. The rest of the album kind of blurs into one for me, if I'm honest with you. It's not something that I listen to all that often, and I probably should give it another go. I probably owe it another spin, to be honest. They played Nuage Fractal on the recent anniversary tour, so that was a hell of a deep cut for them, and mad respect for them for playing stuff off this album when people don't generally seem to like it. But there was a 2-year gap again before the band continued, and this would be the final album in a run of 7 albums with this original lineup in, under 10 years, really. So that's good going, man. And this is 1993's
The Outer Limits.
Why don't we leave this old town?
Yes, The Outer Limits. Now, this one, again, it looks a bit weird, right? It doesn't really look like a Voivod album, does it? You look at it and you think, like, what in the fuck is that album cover? I mean, I get it. It's supposed to be like an old classic sci-fi comic, so it does fit. But it's an interesting mid-career output from a band as legendary as Voivod. It's not as harsh as the early 80s records, and it's not quite as bland as stuff that would follow. I've kind of spoiled maybe some eras there looking forward, but it was definitely better than Angel Rat. So in comparison to Angel Rat, Outer Limits is definitely a strong offering from the band in the 90s, and they were always been unafraid really to play about with their own style and their approach, right? And that maybe has paid off, maybe it hasn't paid off, let's be honest. So this really, again, is one of the ones that falls through the cracks with me. It's not my favorite from Voivod, but people seem to love this thing. If you look at like Rate Your Music or other things, forums and stuff online, it's rated really high. You know, it's coming up to almost 4 or 5, which is really high, you know, for those kinds of sites. And people do have a lot of respect for the Outer Limits. That's why I feel quite bad. It's kind of fallen through the cracks. For me, I'm not really a big fan, and it's a long album as well. There's like an 18-minute song towards the end. I forget what it's called, but it's it's a difficult one. They also they did play a track off this on the recent 40-year anniversary tour, Fix My Heart. They played, that's the opening song, I think, and you know, it's not bad by any stretch, and it's better than Angel Rat, but it's still something I should probably return to. If anything, this retrospective has made me realise I need to return to the Outer Limits. Now, this is where things got a bit fucky for Voivod. Things started to fall apart a bit. I don't really know I don't have any spicy gossip for you. I don't really know the ins and outs of it all. You know, it's kind of before my time, really, and before I was interested in music and so on and so forth. But in the mid to early to mid 90s, sorry, Blacky left the band, the bass player. He was gone. Wikipedia tells me he set up like an avant-garde modern dance company, which is news to me. I've never heard of that. And Snake, the band's original vocalist, also departed. Again, Wikipedia tells me he isolated himself from the band. So again, I'm not really sure what happened there. On the recent kind of tour, when they addressed the material, they did actually perform material that didn't have, you know, Dennis, Snake rather, on vocals. So it was really cool to see him performing that material. And he addressed that period of time when he just kind of like offhand kind of said, yeah, I wasn't in the band at this time, but you know, it's still good. And on Morgoth Tales, their retrospective album, which they've done this year, which we will get to, they also re-recorded stuff from this era. And so that brings us to this era, really. What happened here then? So Piggy, the guitarist, the guy who writes all these crazy riffs, and the drummer Away continued Voivod with someone called Eric Forrest, who took the nickname E-Force. So it E-Force, Piggy, and Away continuing as a 3-piece. And they definitely changed up the old template, as it were. They definitely changed Voivod once more. And the first album we got as this 3-piece was 1995's
Negatron.
Yes, Negatron, another swing out of the left field for Voivod. Just look at this art. I can't decide if that art is amazing or just dreadful. I think it's a mixture of both. My 3-year-old son, my boy, he loves Voivod's album covers because I suppose they are quite basic, you know, in some regards. Like, they're very stark colors and stuff, and they kind of maybe appeal to children, and also quite twisted characters and stuff on them, you know. And you know, I really liked Morgoth Tales recently. I bought Morgoth Tales, and he was in my car, and he was just studying it for what felt like 40 minutes. Like, what's going on here? Asking me all these questions about the cover. And Negatron is very similar to Morgoth Tales in that you've got this sparse kind of industrial landscape. So that's why it reminded me. But yeah, I love the simplicity of Away's art, but maybe it doesn't translate so much into 3D like this. Assuming it was Away that did the art on here, I assume it was. But you know what happens when you assume? You make an ass of you and me. That's what they tell me in work. I've become one of them people that says that. That's what my life has become. So yeah, since I discovered Negatron, there's been a kind of like a war raging in my head. Right? Is it the greatest album cover of all time, or the absolute worst album cover of all time? What do you reckon? Let me know in the comments. As for how Negatron sounds, right? As for that, I rather enjoyed the 90s industrial influenced incarnation of Voivod, because they changed it up again. They didn't keep things the same. They fucking changed it up. The new influences don't really overtake the core of the sound. You still get those like proper widdly fucking, away guitar playing with the, dissonant riffs. How many times, drinking game, how many times do I say dissonant in this video? So there are moments here or there. The closing track, DNA, is probably the biggest culprit of sounding like 90s industrial. And a lot of the types of wailing guitars on here and some of the gruff vocals that are given by E-Force, which are much different to how Snake would do vocals. A lot of this is reminiscent of Justin Broderick's Godflesh project and the stuff he did in the 90s. So, I'm happy with that because I don't really like industrial, but I do like Godflesh. So, Negatron isn't going to win any awards, anytime soon. It's not going to be, it's not going to come up on some fucking greatest albums of all time list, but it does have a cult following, and, I think it fucking rules. So, there we go. So what happened next? That lineup did continue. The E-Force lineup did stay in tow. Blacky stayed out of Voivod. Snake stayed out of Voivod. The band, well, it had to go on, didn't it? And in 1997, they released another album as a 3-piece, and that album was entitled
Phobos.
Yes, 1997's Phobos. Definitely an expansion of what the band did in 1995 with Negatron. It's basically, I don't want to say it's more of the same, because that sounds like it's, uninspired and just churning shit out for the sake of it. But no, it's more of a continuation of that sound, and it's really good. Phobos is fucking great. Yeah, Phobos, it blew my fucking head off the first time I heard it. It's everything I thought Voivod wasn't. I mean, it's not really widdly wanky stuff. It's quite hard hitting, to be fair, and I think a lot of that has to do with the industrial elements, as I said, and of course E-Force's like more gruffer vocal deliveries. Definitely some real sci-fi, real hardcore sci-fi thrash here, motherfuckers. The can't really remember any standout tracks. I just remember listening to the whole thing and it being quite a fucking long album, over an hour long, I'm sure it was, and really digging what I heard. It also ended with a cover, I think a King Crimson cover. Am I on the right album? I think I am. But yeah, it's a good album. It's proper like industrial metal, proper like got a good stonk to it, you know what I mean? And the art is nice and disturbing. Not fussed on that like 90s Voivod logo, I'll be honest with you. But other than that, man, it's all about this. I really enjoyed it when I first heard it. Again, I probably need to go back to it. So, I can't remember if they played anything from this recently on their retrospective tour. Don't think they did, actually. This is probably one of the only ones they missed. I don't know, but I don't think so. Yeah, great album, though. Great album. However, the lineup with Eric, E-Force, Forrest was not to last. So apparently, the guy got into a car accident in Germany, and the band never really recovered after his, the time he had to take to recuperate, himself. And eventually, this, I hope he's all well and good now. And I'm sure a bad car accident does leave traces of, problems in your body. But I hope he's doing okay. I know he continues and he does tour and play the songs that he performed in Voivod. But yeah, it's really cool that he was involved in the latest retrospective record, but we'll get to that at the end. But this was the end of that era. It had a little like sidestep into a 3-piece Voivod. But E-Force left, and Voivod at this point briefly they quit. That was it. It seemed before that they were done. Basically, they ended in around 2000, but then they reformed in 2001. So it wasn't really a long break. It was kind of it's kind of them splitting up at that point. Doesn't really ever get brought up, I think, because realistically, it wasn't for that long. It could have just been a gap between albums, whatever. A year is nothing in band terms, especially for a band that's been going for this long. So they had a little bit of time off, and they came back. They got Snake back on vocals. So Piggy and Away reformed Voivod. Not really sure how they managed to get Snake back, but Snake came back. And unfortunately, at this point, they didn't have Blacky. But there was some shit going down with Metallica at the time. You may have heard, you may have seen, the troubles that Metallica went through in the early 2000s, with the car crash that was, the song I Disappear, followed by the whole some kind of monster documentary bullshit, and then the album Saint Anger, which, we won't talk about that today. If you want to know my opinion on Saint Anger, then check out my Metallica ranking video. But yeah, long story short, Jason Newsted, tired of being the fucking whipping boy of Metallica, no doubt, left Metallica. And he joined Voivod, which was an interesting. He did loads of things. To be fair, I guess the man just wanted his artistic freedom, and you can't fucking blame the guy, can you? So one of the things that Jason Newsted did after he left Metallica was join Voivod, and they released an album in 2003, a self-titled album, no less, and it sounded a little bit like this.
Voivod.
You don't decide what's wrong, what's right. You can define what's good, what's not.
So yeah, here we are, new Voivod, new millennium, third decade of the band's career. Finally, the self-titled release comes, despite the incredibly strong staffing on this record. So the original vocalist back with the original drummer and guitarist, and Metallica's Jason Newsted appearing here as Jasonic, in line with everyone having a funky nickname. Voivod's self-titled begins something of a downward trend in Voivod's studio albums, at least within the decade of the 2000s. There we go, I said it. I'm sure there are other contributing factors to this, but we'll get to those in a minute. But for Voivod self-titled, realistically, it's a solid album, and it's better than the ones that follow it. But if you love Voivod's dissonant riffing and interspliced head-banging sessions in between those dissonant riff sections, but in perhaps a warmer, hard rock kind of way, but kind of like Angel Rat, but not as weird or tied to that particular place in time, then there's no reason you shouldn't enjoy this. But you cannot escape that there are far, far, far better Voivod albums than this. They went in a more of a heavy metal, alternative metal kind of sound here, and that warmer production really steered away from the colder, clinical elements of their thrashy days, both in the industrial 90s days and the 80s manic Swiss Army knife of genres and time signatures days. This is much more straightforward. It has the same template of music underneath it, but like I said, it's filtered through a different chemistry set. It turns out a bit different. So it's pretty good, but it's not the best. And unfortunately, I find, because this is a retrospective, but my opinions are also going to be a part of this. So for me, this isn't really the best kind of, the best era of Voivod. And I think one of the contributing factors for this, and entirely understandably so, was the death of guitarist Piggy. Dennis Demois, is that how you say your name? Is that how it's said? I can't speak French, and these are French Canadians, right? And so if I've said your name wrong, especially in this section about his passing, then that's quite disrespectful, and I apologize. But you don't have to watch maybe two of my videos before you realize that I can't fucking pronounce anyone's name. So I apologize to Piggy for mispronouncing his name, which I have no doubt done. But yes, Piggy passed away, 45 years old, in 2005. Due to colon cancer. So that is very rough. Another musician gone too soon, especially someone as every death is a tragedy, right? Obviously, but I hate it when you say, especially because he was so talented, like that makes his death, more valuable than someone else's. It's just not what I was trying to say. We could get to lines in wax philosophy if you want, but we won't. The philosophy of death and surviving death, but maybe another time. We're talking about Voivod, and yeah, the sad reality is that Piggy passed on, okay, leaving his bandmates to decide to continue without him. And I think, in most cases, I think musicians, unless they got their head fucking so far up their ass, they would like their bandmates to continue without them. And that's exactly what Voivod did.
Katorz. Katorz.
No doubt reeling from the death of their longtime friend and comrade in thrash metal arms, the band released the album Katorz. That means 11 in French, right? I remember. I think I remember from my Voivod days, my high school days, as it were. So Katorz is made from riffs that So this album is made mainly out of riffs that were left behind from Piggy. When he left, they found riffs on his laptop and decided to make songs out of those. So lineup wise, this album it's Away on drums, it's Snake on vocals, you've got Jasonic or Jason Newsted on bass guitar. So I'm not clear on this album because the guitars are credited to Piggy, right? So I don't know if they mixed his riffs into the songs or if they had someone else re-record them. I don't know. I should know that, but I don't know it. So this is probably one of my least favourite Voivod records. It pains me to rank a Voivod album so low, because they're a great band. But I struggled for years to get into the Newsted era and, the final Piggy releases. But I've returned to them now with a greater appreciation for the wider Voivod discography and history. But it is a shame that I'm still not really into this era of the band. Katorz is fairly inoffensive and also fairly safe for Voivod. They've had quote-unquote safe albums before, like Angel Rat, but even that radiated with the band's unique sound and charm. But Katorz is... Remember I said on the self-titled they had that like hard rock kind of sound and direction? This is more of that, with a much looser and warmer sound again, which works for some bands, but none of those things are particularly what I'd come to Voivod for. So R.I.P. Piggy, and it's really cool to see his final riffs here being made into usable songs. But as a rule, this album just doesn't really do anything for me at all, which is a shame. On that note, then, it took them 3 years to release another album because Jason Newsted left the band, and we had... somehow, again, I don't know the internal politics, the return of Blacky. Blacky, the original bass player, came back and joined, and they released 2009's
Infini.
So Infini came in this time, and it came in 2009, a long time after Jason Newsted had left, and they had Blacky back on bass. And they also had a new guitar player called Chewy. Now, oddly enough, even though you had the lineup of Chewy on guitar, Blacky on bass, Away on drums, and Snake on vocals, it seems the lineup on Infini was, at least according to the internet, it was Piggy on guitar, Snake on vocals, Jason Newsted on bass, and Away on drums. So it was quite of a clusterfuck. He was still having a few tracks left over from, Piggy and his laptop and all the stuff he left behind. Still songs there being made from those riffs. So I don't really know what the overlap with the quote-unquote new and old members is, but it's a confusing era for Voivod. What doesn't really have me diving into, all the vaults to find this information out is, well, Infini kind of suffers a similar fate to that of Katorz. Infini falls a bit flat by treading in slightly safer territory than the band's usual frenetic prog metal output. Is Infini bad? No, absolutely not. Some would have you believe that this era of Voivod needs wiping from the face of the earth, but, I'm not one of those people. There is, however, a reason why this period of Voivod languishes as the least favourite for most people, I think, who are into the band. Is Infini better than Katorz? My answer would probably vary day to day. From a technical standpoint, though, I will quickly say that the record is well produced, with a warm and analog sound, or at least what feels like that. But it's definitely a better production than Katorz and the self-titled. But it still kind of just falls in with that camp. But this era just is quite... It has that heavy metal, alternative rock kind of feel, and it really just doesn't... Even though the artwork there makes you think like, oh, this is going to be amazing, this is going to be like old school Voivod of old, but no, alas not. It doesn't quite live up to the legacy of Voivod, and it kind of languishes with those albums there in the central run. So that 3-album run of self-titled Katorz and 3 years later Infini, you think a little bit of a break, it's going to make all the difference. But no, it kind of all kind of comes together into one unfortunate mediocre maelstrom. So that leaves like the 2000s era of Voivod being quite, easily to be dismissed. It's not the greatest thing in the world for various reasons. Moving on then, the band did continue, obviously. They did keep going. We're still here, we're still talking. And they decided at this point to create another album, yet again. So recording new music, writing and recording brand new music, this time with Chewy as the guitar player, right? They released their 13th studio album in 2013. That album was called
Target Earth.
Yeah, Target Earth. What a return to form. That artwork, I love that artwork. It's got to be one of my favourite Voivod album covers. Just look at that artwork. It's mad. It's crazy. I love that logo as well. That didn't last long. That particular version of the Voivod logo, really good. Love it. Absolutely love it. Target Earth. What a return to form. The wailing guitars, the robotic vocals, the odd time signatures. It's like killing technology for the new millennium, as it were. Always expect the unexpected when it comes to Voivod. And I did not expect at this point a return to the sound of old. And, that kind of like warm, stonery kind of rock sound of the 2000s era is just dead like that. Killed dead. Love this thing. Absolutely love this thing. My favorite 2 songs on this are the opening 10 minutes, Target Earth, and the title track, and Cluescap Ocom. I don't know if I'm saying that right. Track 2. Those are my favorites. I love the whole thing. Long album, nearly an hour long. Fucking great. Voivod, back in the seat. This is how you make a Voivod album. This is fucking brilliant. And I don't want to harp on about it, but this is one of their best albums. I love it. It's fucking great. And they have a similar trajectory, I think, to Killing Joke. Killing Joke, they kind of had the classics era. Maybe not as many classic albums as Voivod has. And then they went off the rails and did some weaker albums. And they had a member who passed away. And then in their later years, they have this renaissance which kind of reinterprets their older material into something heavier and more visceral. And that's exactly what Voivod are doing to this day. And so that both Killing Joke and Voivod have a very strangely similar kind of path, at least from an outsider's view. And Target Earth is fucking brilliant. And I recommend it to anybody, any fans of metal music. And I can't recommend it enough. So it would take the band, I think they released an EP or 2 in this time. They've released the Post Society EP, which had the cover of Silver Machine on it, which was interesting. But it wasn't until 2018 we got a new album. So it was a 5-year gap between albums. That's a fair gap. But the next album we got was
The Wake.
2018's The Wake. Now, if you liked Target Earth, then you're going to fucking love The Wake. I'm probably preaching to the choir. If you're watching this far into a Voivod retrospective, chances are you've heard this album. Voivod will always have a special place in my heart, and it's because of albums like The Wake, I guess. They slowly grown, from being this weird, space thrash to, they've grown from the Lost in Space of thrash to being the 2001 A Space Odyssey of thrash. It's probably derivative at this point to pull together a bunch of purposefully dissonant riffs and awkward tempo changes and call it sci-fi thrash, but the answer is fuck, who cares? This is brilliant. And if you're Voivod, you can do what the fuck you want. For me, I feel that the band have been on something of a second wind since Target Earth dropped in the early 2010s, and The Wake is proof of this continuing perfection of this space thrash sound. Sure, they may now be faster and more technical bands playing in this style, like Vector and that kind of stuff, but nobody does it quite like Voivod and their awkward, nerdy metal, which is perfectly displayed for you on the Wake. It will always be special, and this album is a perfect showcase of that brilliant album. What an era for Voivod this is. But it didn't stop there. Again, another 4 years. So it's another big gap between albums. But, these guys are getting older now. They're slowing down, respectfully. And in 2022, the band would release their most recent, canonical studio album. And that is called
Synchro Anarchy.
Now, if you look up Synchro Anarchy online, one of the first things you will probably find is complaints about the production, about how it's overcompressed and it kind of does the song sound a disservice. But I disagree with that. I really enjoyed, Synchro Anarchy and its compression and its production. In fact, I've got the CD somewhere, and it sounds perfectly fine to me. It sounds like modern metal. You can't complain that Voivod's Synchro Anarchy is overcompressed when, like, pretty much it's still more organic sound than 90% of the fucking metal that's out there now. Like, it is. I'm not trying to be, all the old stuff was better. Like, talent aside, the, like, modern digital production that's super overcompressed, like, degen sound just fucking fills me with dread. Like, why would you? I won't go as far as like Fenris and Darkthrone to like disavow anything that's even remotely clean, but it's still, no, it's too much. Synchro Anarchy, right? I'm going off topic. So Synchro Anarchy itself, right, is another amazing album from Canada's legendary Voivod, right? The fact that these guys are even still going is at this point nothing short of a miracle. Something I need to mention as well that I forgot to mention before I got stuck into this album, is that Blacky left the band once more, leaving them without a bass player. So the bass player on this album is a guy called Rocky, and he fits right in. Nice rumbling low bass on here. So yeah, they're fucking great, right? They're forging on albums like Synchro Anarchy the chaotic and dissonant madness of their 80s output, with modern production and sensibilities and a sharper and more mature songwriting streak. I do understand why some fans have started to say that Voivod are falling into a rut, maybe, because this is the third album, the Target Earth, The Wake, Synchro Anarchy. It's the third album in a row with a very similar sound, but like, this is so much fucking better than any other time they've done that rut. And they're not just going round and round stuck in the mud. They are doing interesting songs. And that's the important thing. Like, not every band needs to change with every album. Some bands can stick to sounds. I know Voivod does change a lot, but in regards to this hat-trick of albums, they can keep the same sound and still write interesting songs. I genuinely believe that's possible. I also think that Synchro Anarchy, for what it's worth, is probably the weakest of this era of releases: Target Earth, The Wake, and Synchro Anarchy. The quality is still amazingly high, and no doubt many fans of more experimental thrash music will enjoy this one. But it's still maybe not as good as the ones that came before it. But still pretty fucking good, right? Still pretty fucking good. Standout tracks for me gotta be fucking Sleeves Off, I really like, and I really, really like Planet Eaters. I think Planet Eaters, despite what I just said, one of my favourite Voivod songs, hence why I opened this video with it. And that's it really here for the canonical Voivod albums. They did release, however, in 2023, a year later,
Morgoth Tales.
That's, of course, referencing their original demo. What was that called? Morgoth Invasion. Well, they had 3 demos, right? And Morgoth Invasion was the name of one of the demos. So yeah, Morgoth Tales came out this year. It's not really a new material, but it is a selection of different Voivod tracks from all over the previous 40 years, re-recorded with the current lineup, reinterpreted, with the lineup of Snake, Away, Rocky and Chewy. So, Voivod have had a few lineup changes, and overall Morgoth Tales is pretty good. Like, hearing the re-recorded versions of Killing Technology, Macro Solutions, Pre-Ignition, Fix My Heart, and they brought Eric Forrest back for a song. They brought Jason Newsted back for a song, Rebel Robot, I think it was. And it's just like, and they had one unique new song called Morgoth Tales. But realistically, as cool as this is, and it sounds probably more like how you would hear the songs today performed live, and just want to say they're still fucking tight as fuck, really fucking on the money. Their live show is fucking outstanding. But yeah, what I'm saying is that you might as well just listen to the originals. This is nice. It's a bit of fun. I have the CD. I own it. And if you're a big Voivod fan and you haven't got this, I would recommend getting it. But generally though, yeah, it's kind of, you're not going to get anything new here than you didn't have in the original versions of the songs. There's nothing that's majorly reinterpreted, but yeah, I mean, this is great. Voivod, one of the greatest bands of all time, 40 years of solid music that they have given us. Like, we're so grateful to have, we should be so grateful, I should say, to have bands like Voivod that have stuck around, and maybe, maybe they haven't released constant non-stop 10 out of 10 albums. There have been albums that are perhaps maybe not that great, but they've persevered and they've stayed with us, and it's worth it. It's worth the journey, definitely. If you're a metalhead and you're into the more interesting elements, that's not to say what you're into maybe now isn't interesting, but if you want to go off on a bit of a weird journey, then I would highly recommend listening to all of Voivod's albums, like, chronologically. I think that's a hell of a journey to go on, and I had a whale of a time doing it, and I would recommend it. I would say here, I mean, I would echo what the band said live, actually, and I would cheers, I would raise my beverage to Voivod and say, here's to another 40 years of Voivod. But we need to be realistic and accept that's not going to happen. We'd be lucky to get another 20, really, wouldn't we? So as they said live, they have no intention of stopping, and I'm sure they would keep going until they physically couldn't. As with a lot of these bands that have been around for this amount of time and longer, they know nothing else. This is their life. This is their purpose. They are musicians through and through, and they will continue, I hope, to release new albums as long as they are physically and mentally able to do so. So, with that in mind, peace and long life to all my members of Voivod that are still kicking out there. Thank you so much for all the last 40 years of excellent thrash music and pushing the envelope and being such a huge influence on so many fucking bands that are around now. I mean, Voivod are one of those bands that are super influential. For obvious reasons, and we may not agree. You, the metal fan watching this video, you may not agree with things I've said about these albums, but at the end of the day, what I think about these albums doesn't matter. It's just my opinion and how I carried myself through creating this video. What matters is that they have given us this enormous body of work to enjoy, and it'll always be there, and that's the important thing, and they will never be forgotten in space. This shit is forever, and it's going to be here forever, unless maybe like an asteroid hits the planet and destroys everything at once. You lose the internet and all physical copies of all the Voivod stuff, maybe then it'll be forgotten in space. But I think we'll have bigger problems than worrying about Voivod's discography at that point. But yeah, I'm clearly talking complete and utter rubbish. So I think it's a good time, if any, to end the video. It's been nice to be back. It's been a few months since I've done a Lines in Wax video, so it's good to be back. I hope you enjoyed my Voivod retrospective. I'm going to go get a sandwich, I think. I'm going to go get a sandwich and listen to some Voivod. That's what I'm going to do. And I think I'm going to leave it at that. All the best. Thank you so much for watching. If you somehow enjoyed this ridiculous ramble, then please subscribe to the channel. It definitely helps promote the channel. YouTube goes, people are pressing like on this, so please press and subscribe. Let's show some more metalheads. It fuels the fire beneath the fucking algorithm, whatever the fuck that is. Not that I'm aiming for YouTube superstardom at all in any way, shape or form, but may just get this video out to a few more people that are interested in this kind of thing. That's what it's all about, really. So thank you so much again for watching. If you're still with me right to the end, fucking thank you, and I'll see you in the next video, whenever the fuck that will be. It could be in a week, it could be in 6 months, you know. Who the fuck knows anymore? Life is so unfucking predictable. Take care of yourselves. Don't get forgotten in space. I'll see you soon. All the best.
Lines in wax.